Hello, everyone. I am Matt Williamson. How's everyone doing this wonderful day? We have not done a pure mailbag episode in quite a while, so you guys ask fantastic questions. So it was hard to kind of narrow some down. A lot of them overlapped, so if I didn't pick yours, I might have picked one that's very similar. And let's dig right in. Michael Odesso asks, instead of all the negativity, let's shout out Larry O and Deshaun Elliott. They have been fantastic, especially in the run game. They always seem to be around the ball. I think that's fair. I mean, hey, you guys could have your share of negativity. I don't look at this game as it was a tragedy. Even the defensive performance, which was terrible for the first 3 series or so, but then firmed up really well. But you're right. Ogunjobi's a guy I've had kind of mixed feelings on, and I do think less is more of him, and the more rotating and depth you use makes him much more effective. He's also had some injuries over the years, of course, too. But no, he's had a really good season to date, and I think that's 100% true with Elliott as well. I mean, I think his versatility is really impressive. He has been really good against the run as well. I don't see a liability in coverage with Elliott, though, and a really nice addition, solid starter, the type of guy coaches love, and they're getting a lot out of Ogunjobi. So, Michael, I agree with you. I think those two are guys that are certainly in the pleasant surprise column, not the negative column at all. Link Hogthrob, always ask great questions. Thanks for all the nice things you've said over the years as well. And he asks, can you speak to the style of blocking Arthur Smith's offense employs versus what Najee historically has done well with, gapper man, etc.? I get way out of my depth quickly. We have talked about this a little. Well, we've talked about a fair amount. But one thing I think an easy way for you guys to keep an eye on the run game and the blocking schemes is pullers and trappers. And we're seeing very, very little of that. And that implies it's a man blocking scheme. Like, pull this guard around the edge. He is in charge of finding linebacker X, and that's his guy, you know. Now, there's much, much more zone in Pittsburgh now than before. And actually, I'll look up the percentages, but we're seeing very few pullers. And I have mixed feelings about that. We could go back weeks of talking about it because I think that the offense got a lot better last year when they put Broderick Jones in the game and weaponized him as a puller and as an attacking player, as opposed to 5 linemen in Washington or whoever moving as one. Now, Smith does disguise and alter his run game very, very well. Small tweaks that are hard to notice. But I want to focus more on Najee. I don't think he's a great zone runner, which I think is part of the reason they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, is part of the reason he's struggling more than others, part of the reason. And really what you're looking for from the zone running game is think of like old school Mike Shanahan, you know, Portis and guys like that would wait as the linemen are moving to left or right, kind of get your momentum going a little bit as a back. And then the term everybody uses is just stick your foot in the ground when you have a gap that you want to attack and attack downhill now with suddenness. You know, like the runs aren't designed that you have to go to the B gap or you have to go to the A gap or you have to wait for this. It's when you feel it and you see it, you hit it with everything you got. You know, those fast Niners and Dolphins backs. Speed is certainly helpful, but none of that's really Najee's game, to be honest with you. So almost all good backs can do both. I mean, they all can do both. They all have done both. No team is 100% one or the other, but I don't view Najee as a real good zone runner, to be honest with you. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the NFL to college, BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head over to online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE, capital BLEAV, all caps, and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. Nothing is for free 72 asks, do you think Liao is a better fit as a replacement for Highsmith? I feel he would hold up better against the run, and Herbig could rotate in on some known passing downs. My take on that was I wanted to see Herbig in a close to full-time role against the Colts, but that's also the wrong type of team for him. You know, maybe more Liao in that game would have gone a long way because their tight ends are more blockers. Their O-line is high end. Dealing with Taylor and presumably Richardson is a physical battle, is more of a bigger man's game, where Dallas is throw. Their blockers aren't as physical. Their tight ends aren't as good in the run game. But I see what you're saying because I like Liao, and maybe that should be a 65-35 split in Herbig's favor and 100% obviously in passing downs. I see what you're saying, and I'm open to the idea, but we only have one true game of sample size to go off of, so I'm not going to get crazy on that quite yet. Brad Prentice asks, hey, Matt, in addition to botched snaps, I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty coming out of the huddle. Is there a bit of a communication problem, or is it everyone learning a new scheme, including basically 4 new rookies on the O-line? I attribute it more to the latter. That's one of the reasons that if you're lobbying for Russell Wilson, though, I think things would be much cleaner, crisper in that regard, just because of his experience. And watching both quarterbacks at training camp, that was absolutely the case in terms of Wilson. But yeah, there's a lot of change going on here. I mean, you start shuffling O-lines around, there's always communication and timing issues. Rookie center is a really hard job as it is. You got to think 3 of the 4 games were on the road, 2 in a dome, 1 in a really difficult place to play. I know that sounds like excuses, but quarterback in a new city, offensive coordinator in a new city, a young offense to begin with, shuffling O-line. I think we have to have a little leeway with that. Not the botched snap. The botched snap was on Fields. I mean, just watch it. I mean, that was on him. But I'm talking about just some procedural stuff that needs to be cleaner and crisper. Rob Marsico asks, is the secondary not as good as we thought? It seems as if the front can't get pressure. The secondary can't sustain coverage consistently. First off, that's true for basically every secondary in this league. I mean, past 2.5 seconds in the pocket, all secondaries in the league, even the best ones, are now at a disadvantage. I still think it's a pretty good group. Now, I wish there was a third corner with Trice's injury that I trusted more. I wish the slot corner was somebody I trusted more. And sooner than later, Sutton might be both those guys. We already talked about Elliott. I think Minka's a star. Safety depth is fine. Porter has had a little more ups and downs than maybe we would have thought this year. But all in all, I think it's a above average secondary. So I guess maybe some of that is how good did you think it was to begin with? But I think it's a pretty good group that certainly is aided by a really good front seven. Colby Zink, what wide receivers would you be interested in going after at this point? Kirk from Jacksonville, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams from the Raiders, the three names he mentioned. And those are the 3 I'd be after too. I mean, we are on the same wavelength here. And a lot of you also asked about some other trade things, including should they go trade for an offensive lineman. That's really hard to do. I'll get back to those receivers in a minute, but quality linemen don't get moved hardly at all, period. And in the middle of the season, close to never. Now, I also think we need to recognize one thing too, that the Fields trade is there's a contingency on it, based on playing time. And it sure looks like they're going to have, I should have the trade in front of me, but it sure looks like the Steelers are going to have to pay the more expensive price for Fields than the cheaper price because of playing time. So my point is their draft capital for next year isn't runneth over. You know, like we got to be a little more aware of the picks you have to offer going forward. And I know they want to make as many picks and they want to build through youth, but they also have tons of cap space. And if they wanted, it'd be expensive, but you could go sign T. Higgins in free agency. You know, there's some possibilities. That doesn't help you this year, but I'm just talking about big future team building. You could bring back Dan Moore, which I'm getting more and more open to. But Adams, I think, would be clearly the most expensive. I think he's probably a second round pick. Maybe you could do a 3 and a 5, something like that. I think Kirk would be a 3. And I think Hopkins you could get pretty cheap, especially after they lose another game or so. And you have to pay all their contracts, which aren't nothing, but they have the room. I think all of them would be serious additions, but in that order. I mean, Adams would maybe become your target leader. Hopkins would be a really nice side note, you know, go up and get it type guy at this stage of his career. And Kirk is really good out of the slot as well as outside, and he's physical and has some Steeler traits that I bet they like. So you're on the same page I am. Last question, Skip Bateman. Tomlin said when Flacco came in the game, it took time to adjust. Why? He's faced Flacco so many times. Colts had no problem transitioning to Flacco. It's a great question. And first off, Flacco's been a Colt now since, February or May. So they've had camp and mini camp and probably a little bit of practice per week in the regular season to practice the Flacco offense, which things aren't going to be like called differently. I mean, they're not going to have new names, but the plays you call are going to be night and day different, of course, for Richardson. So that's a lot more time. Not to mention they did the Minshew stuff last year, you know, with its exact same staff and Pittman and all those dudes, which is a much different offense than Richardson. So going 180 degrees with their offense is definitely easier than a team that they're playing that has to do it mid-game. Now, of course they know who Flacco is, and Tomlin knows who Flacco is, but how much time during the week, again, I tell you this all the time, practice time during the week is much more limited than than many realize. You can't waste time, which waste is the wrong word, spend time on the backup quarterback, even though it's a totally different system. Of course, they knew he's not going to run. They're not going to run quarterback power. They're not going to do Richardson things with Flacco. But that doesn't mean you practiced it or had checks for it, or hypothetically, you want to play a lot more man with Flacco. You want to play a lot more zone with Richardson, so you have eyes on him as a runner. Well, we didn't do that all week, and it wasn't in the game plan, and all the film we watched and all the prep time we did wasn't along those lines. So the defensive staff has to kind of shuffle things together and be like, man, remember that blitz we did last year in week 6 that we haven't practiced in a month? That would be great against Flacco, but Elliott's never done it in his life, you know? I mean, so that's the type of thing I mean, not we didn't know who Flacco was. We thought he was going to run just like Richardson. No, I mean, it's adjusting on the fly. This isn't Madden where you can hit pause, think about it, go get a beer. All right, let's look at our blitz schemes or whatever. I don't play Madden, but you get the idea. There's a lot more stuff happening on the fly where the defensive staff all of a sudden has to be like, maybe they had some communication during the week about it. I'm sure they had some. But now it's like, okay, we thought 3 or 4 concepts would be good, and we don't have our full gamut. You know what I mean? I hope I'm explaining that well, because there are logistics to it all. You can't just hit pause, you know? All right, everyone, that was great. Thanks. Take care.